Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to ULT San Diego, here for the Aquarian series. The title of the presentation this afternoon is Will and Desire, which will be given to us by Desiree Van Sanen, and our chairperson for this afternoon is Laura Gray. Very good. All right, so I would like to, before we get started, do a reading. This is from The Secret Doctrine, stanza 3, volume 1. The last vibration of the seventh eternity thrills throughout infinitude. The mother swells, expanding from within without, like the bud of the lotus. The vibration sweeps along, touching with its swift wing the whole universe and the germ that dwelleth in darkness, the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life. Darkness radiates light, and light drops one solitary ray into the mother deep. The ray shoots through the virgin egg. The ray causes the eternal egg to thrill and drop the non-eternal germ, which condenses into the world egg. Then the three fall into the four. The radiant essence becomes seven inside, seven outside. The luminous egg, which in itself is three, curdles and spreads in milk white curds throughout the depths of mother, the root that grows in the depths of the ocean of life. The root remains, the light remains, the curds remain, and still Oiao is one. The root of life was in every drop of the ocean of immortality, and the ocean was radiant light, which was fire and heat and motion. Darkness vanished and was no more. It disappeared in its own essence, the body of fire and water, or father and mother. We give to you our own Desiree Van Sanen.
Okay. Thank you so much, Monica, for reciting that piece from the Book of John stanza. I believe that was stanza 3. Beautiful. So today we're going to talk about desire and will, and it's going to be from a more exalted point of view, a metaphysical point of view. We'll start out with the Hermetic truism. Noble resolves and self-binding commitments are accessible to the spiritual will that is allied with the active aspect of buddhi. We're going to be talking more about spiritual will and the active aspect of buddhi the second half of this presentation. I want to focus a little bit more, though, on desire and will before we head there. So we'll be going through a brief introduction. I decided to put some words of my own, a collection of them together, just to kind of get myself in a space where we can talk about these things. And with the help of Sri Raghavan Iyer, I'll be just presenting an introduction. And we'll follow that up with Kamadeva, the primal impulse, also desire and will, or impulse involution, the awakening of buddhi, kundalini, spiritual will, and final quotations from Sri Raghavan Iyer and Hugh Janssen Fawcett. The movement of desire and will on this mundane world of sensual, intelligent, and intuitive expression exhibits itself in wishful thought, in prayer, in dream, in fantasy, in the longing to create, to bring life into sensual form, to mold it, protect it, and in some cases, even destroy it. The Rig Veda states desire is the primal seed and germ of mind. All desire, no matter how wide it may pendulate from its home, cannot exist unless there was first existed the parental font from whence its shadowy impulse emanated, a perfect desire to awaken to the dawn of life. For no impulse could ever exist without that first initiating impulse to awaken. It is that universal and pure impulse, which is so beautifully described in the Rig Veda as the desire that arose in it. These words symbolize the universal compulsion to awaken unto itself, to know itself, to understand the very essence and complexity of his own consciousness. But to do so requires will, the volition of desire, the concentration of that flame in the hearth of the human heart. A hearth that galvanizes and focuses effort through an undaunted determination to know truth for the sake of truth itself. Through the renunciation of the minutiae of sensual distraction, and above all, through the ever-pervasive and ever-present dharma of desire for which all existence depends. That overarching torch is love eternal. In The Secret Doctrine, Helena Blavatsky indicates that the Manvantric impulse commences with the reawakening of cosmic ideation or the universal mind, concurrently with and parallel to the primary emergence of cosmic substance. Sri Raghavan Iyer also clarifies and says that it is the sacred bond between entity and non-entity, pellucid manas and pure Atma Buddhi, before it is transformed into the magnetic attraction between forms. Thus, the creative powers of the Agnishwata Arupa hosts are already implicit in Daviprakriti, the light of the unmanifest logos, itself the product of the purely noumenal impress of divine thought upon pre-cosmic root substance. This is the unrelenting motion of contraction and expansion, involution and evolution, in every case preceded by a spark to awaken. Because these are such exalted ideas and very abstract, Raghavan Iyer gives us a way to kind of work with them. Basically states that man is a compact kingdom within manifold centers of energy that are microcosmic foci, connected with macrocosmic influences. There is a fundamental logic to the vast unfolding from one source through rays of light in myriad directions into numerous centers that are all held together by a single Fahadic force, an ordering principle of energy. The logic of emanation is the same for the cosmos as for man. The arcane teaching of the divine hierarchies of Jnana Buddhas, of the three sets of builders, and of the mysterious Lipika conveys intimations of invisible, ever-present, noumenal patterns that underlie this immense universe of which every human being is an integral part. The ordered movement of the vast whole, is also mirrored in the small, in all the atoms, and is paradigmatically present in the symmetries and asymmetries of the human form, with its differentiated and specialized organs of perception and of action. He goes on to ask us to pay special attention to the human form, and in this case, the human hand. He says, what does it mean to have a hand with 5 fingers? Why is one finger called the index finger? And what is the purpose of pointing in human life? What is the significance of the thumb? And what is its connection with will and determination, which must be both strong and flexible? Can flexibility and fluidity be combined in human life in ways analogous to what is exemplified in the physical world by all the lunar hierarchies impressed with the intelligence that comes from higher planes? What is the function of the little finger, which is associated with Mercury? What is the connection between speech and the seemingly unimportant digit, which is important for those who have skill in the use of hands, whether in instrumental music or in craftsmanship? When one is ready to ask questions of this kind, taking nothing for granted, then one can look at statues of the Buddha and of various gods in many traditions, where the placement of the hand is extraordinarily significant. Whether it is pointing above, pointing below, whether it is extended outwards, whether it is in the form of an oblation or receiving an offering, or in the familiar mudra of the hand that blesses. What is the meaning of the joining of the thumb and the central finger, which is given great importance in ancient mystical texts? There are bodily functions so frequent and common to all life that we would be hard-pressed to even notice them, let alone wonder of their special significance, such as the cycles of waking and sleeping, the compulsion to breathe in and the impulsion to release, and the rhythm of the beating heart. Why does the heart pulse? Each beat preceded by an electrical impulse that the heart itself mysteriously initiates from its sinus node, located in the upper right atria. While science may be prepared to answer each of these questions from a strictly mechanical view, even they must admit that there are forces unseen that pervade the universe and for which all visible signs are merely effects. We must go well beyond even the effects of force, and from the hearth of love, the fire of compassion, and an intuitive understanding of the interconnectedness of all that exists, examine the righteous dharma of all life in all of its expressions, its mathematical precision, its archetypal order, and like the child who looks to the stars in speechless wonder and reverence, its unspeakable beauty. As above, so below, as every manvantaric dawn is preceded by an impulse to awaken, so too the same electrical impulse awakens the heart to contract and expand, releasing its life principle into the body human. Every heartbeat in its own right is the initiation of a cycle mirroring its parent. If we look at the stanza 5, we read that the primordial 7, the first 7 breathes of the dragon of wisdom, produce in their turn from their holy circumvibrating breaths the fiery whirlwind. HPB explains, that the causes of existence mean not only the physical causes known to science, but the metaphysical causes, the chief of which is the desire to exist, an outcome of Nidana and Maya. This desire for a sentient life shows itself in everything, from an atom to the sun, and is a reflection of the divine thought propelled into objective existence, into a law that the universe should exist. According to esoteric teaching, the real cause of that supposed desire and of all existence remains forever hidden, kind of like the impulse that generates the heart to contract. And its first emanations are the most complete abstractions mind can conceive. In our theosophical glossary, Kamadeva is a very, very important concept and a very exalted concept to wrap our heads around. Kama is the first conscious, all embracing desire for universal good, love, and for all that lives and feels, needs help and kindness. The first feeling of infinite tender compassion and mercy that arose in the consciousness of the creative one force as soon as it came into life and being as a ray from the absolute. Says the Rig Veda, as was said before, desire first arose in it, which was the primal germ of mind, and which sages, searching with their intellect, have discovered in their heart to be the bond which connects entity with non-entity, or manas with pure Atma Buddhi. When the divine sun breaks forth, then Fohat becomes the propelling force, the active power, which causes the one to become two and three on the cosmic plane of manifestation. The Kamadevic impulse provides the initial impulse to manifest, to awaken, and which in turn ignites Fohat, that cosmic energy that links non-being to being, subject to object. One way to consider this is the ringing of a bell. You can think cosmically. There's a bell that rings, and from that, and in all directions, that sound radiates or pulsates out. That's a Fohatic sound wave that resonates in all directions. There's a special prayer that is devoted to in the Atharva Veda, a prayer to Kama, which reads, Kama was born at first. Him neither the gods, nor the fathers, nor men have equaled. To these art thou superior and ever great as are the heavens and earth in extent, as far as the waters have swept, as far as fire, to these art thou superior and ever great as are the directions of space and the intermediate direction on either side. Great as are the regions and the vistas of the sky. To these art thou superior and ever great. So, what can we say about that first impulse? That first impulse is a desire, the primal seed and germ of mind. The first impulse that initiates the awakening of universal mind. That first impulse that manifests as Fohat, which is latent in the unmanifested state, but activated in manifested state. That first impulse that awakens the Fohatic sevenfold power that connects the unmanifested to the manifested, or spirit to matter. It is the underlying force of creation, transformation, and preservation. It ever is, controlling the onset and close of both manifestations and pralayas. It is, in fact, motion, the engine and heartbeat of the cosmos. It is Eros of Greek mythology, universal love. What can we say about will? In the Theosophical Glossary, It states that will is that which governs the manifested manifested universes in eternity. Will is the one and sole principle of abstract eternal motion, or its ensouling essence. Like all the rest, the will is septenary in its degrees of manifestation, emanating from the one, eternal, abstract, and purely quiescent will, Atma and Lima. It becomes Buddhi in its alaya state, descends lower as Maha or Manas, and runs down the ladder of degrees until the divine Eros becomes, in its lower animal manifestation, erotic or sensual desire. Will, as an eternal principle, is neither spirit nor substance, but of everlasting ideation. I think this last line is so something to really contemplate. Will, as an eternal principle, is neither spirit nor substance, but everlasting ideation. And in that, this mindset goes to its motion, everlasting motion. So, what can we say about Kundalini in this process of the sevenfold manifestation? Kundalini Sakti is the power of life, one of the forces of nature, that power that generates a certain light in those who sit for spiritual and clairvoyant development. It is a power known only to those who practice concentration and yoga. Before the mystic power can make of thee a god, Lanu, thou must have gained the faculty to slay thy lunar form at will. There is a footnote to this verse out of the Voice of the Silence that reads, Kundalini is the serpent power or mystic fire. Kundalini is called the serpentine or the annular power on account of its spiral-like working or progress in the body of the ascetic, developing the power in himself. It is an electric, fiery occult or Vahadic power, the great pristine force which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. In the Voice of the Silence, it reads, let not thy heaven-born, merged in the sea of Maya, break from the universal parent or soul, but let the fiery power retire into the inmost chamber, the chamber of the heart, and the abode of the world's mother. Then from the heart, that power shall rise into the sixth, which is Buddhi, the middle region, the place between thine eyes, when it becomes the breath of the one soul, the voice which filleth all, thy master's voice. 'Tis only then thou canst become a walker of the sky, who treads the winds above the waves, whose step touches not the waters. It's explained that the power and the world mother are names given to Kundalini, one of the mystic yogi powers. It is Buddhi considered as an active instead of a passive principle, which it is generally when regarded only as a vehicle or casket of the Supreme Spirit or Atma. It is an electro-spiritual force, a creative power, which, when aroused into action, can as easily kill as it can create. So here, I believe they're saying that Buddhi is actually Kundalini. Kundalini active. So the spiritual, according to the key of theosophy, the spiritual divine ego is the spiritual soul or Buddhi in close union with Manas, the mind principle, without which it is no ego at all, but only the atmic vehicle. Intuition is in Manas for the more or less light shed on it by Buddhi, whether it is assimilated much or little with Buddhi. So the conception that I'm coming to here is that it is only through active buddhi that Manas can even begin, that it can be reflected in Manas. And I think, because I consider buddhi to be a sound, and it's not wavering, it's very stable. It's not going to go anywhere, the sound. We experience that sound through intuition, feeling, an idea that's in alignment with that sound. But we can only experience it if Manas is activated. And we can have more discussion on this. That's how I'm kind of figuring out the connection between the two. So Manas acts as kind of I would say high Manas would act as kind of a translator of sorts. It's taking that sound and it's reflecting it so that this human form can actually begin to experience it, and we experience it as intuition. Buddhi by itself can neither have intuition of itself, nor non-intuition, nor anything. It is simply the cementing link, so to say, between the higher spirit or Atman and Manas. So, because if it's not active, it's only through that Kundalini connection, that Tyasic connection between it and Manas, that it can reflect this sound in such a way that we can receive it. Some things to consider from Master KH regarding this awakening of buddhi. He writes that fathom the nature and essence of the sixth principle of the universe and man, and you will have fathomed the greatest mystery in this our world. The supreme energy resides in the buddhi, but that it is latent as long as buddhi is wedded to Atman alone. That supreme but latent divine energy becomes active and irresistible when the Manas unites with it or begins to merge into it. In the Secret Doctrine, there's a reference to fire by friction, the Taijasic union between buddhi, the sixth, and Manas, the fifth principles, which thus are united or cemented together, the fifth merging partially into and becoming part of the monad. And this is an illumination of the human soul by the light of the divine soul, or the spirit of divine self-consciousness. And it is through this principle that Manas is able to conceive of or receive intuition. So we're going to go on to our next phase in the presentation on spiritual will. Start out from this statement from HPB on her article regarding true happiness and altruism. She writes, true spiritual perfection and knowledge are nothing else but the complete identification of our finite selves with the all great, with the great all. Sorry. It's an interesting story, article that was written by a gentleman by the name of Barrett Callenbach. He wrote an article entitled Behind Will Stands Desire. So, in this article, he discusses the difference between what is personal will and what is spiritual will. Makes these distinctions out. Human will is personal, it's ever-changing, temporary, and usually is the result of something somebody wants. And spiritual will is omnipresent, universal, unchanging, impersonal, constant. He writes, when we experience a will, no matter how we might see fit to categorize it, we could begin to practice looking behind the will for a desire impelling it. Such practice can lead to clarification of motives and to greater singleness of will, of purpose. Plato, for example, taught the entire purpose is to become one man instead of many. This points to the need of developing a single-mindedness and will, an ability to hold to a purpose. He goes on to write, it is also taught that this uncovering is not always pleasant, a fact sensed by many people, leading to various modes of flight from the encounter. As Krishna teaches, light and darkness are the world's eternal ways. The collective unconscious can be seen as both darkness that elicits the greater fear, while at the same time, as Arjuna discovered, to see too much light too soon. It becomes increasingly apparent that an existential understanding of the phrase, beyond will stands desire, is not the work of a day or even of a lifetime. It requires, in fact, nothing less than a full commitment to its understanding in theory and to its application in practice. When I read this and thought of the despondency of Arjuna, we really don't experience this agitation until we put our mind to it, because then our mind becomes focused on the agitation within us. And I think in the Voice of the Silence, the Lanu is instructed to keep the mind cool while the body is agitated. And this is a reference to this discomfort that one may begin to feel and does, and it's a natural process when they decide to study these truisms and put into practice a more exalted life. In this article on spiritual will by Raghavan Iyer, he writes that the awakening of intuitive insight is an essential prerequisite to authentic participation in human life. Noetic awakening presupposes that one learns to take nothing for granted and repeatedly recreates a sense of wonder and openness. It is necessary to increase silence in relation to speech, contemplation in relation to action, and deliberation in relation to impetuous response. Living from within, each day becomes charged with rich significance and is a vital link in a continuous thread of creative ideation. So immense are the potentials of human consciousness that for a true yogin, a single day is like an entire incarnation. When individuals truly kindle the spark of Buddhimanas, they can rapidly move away from the nether region of dark distrust and abject dependence and actively think in terms of the high prerogatives and vast possibilities of human life. Through calm contemplation, they can come closer to the highest energies in the cosmos. Through proper alignment with what is above and within, they readily perceive the world as a shadowy reflection of reality and also see beyond fleeting images to the hidden core of what gives vitality and continuity to the stream of consciousness. The mental portrait of the self-governed sage who ever remains in effortless attunement to the parentless source becomes a transforming reality in daily life. I was wondering if someone else could read this piece as we come to a near close.
Or I can read it.
Thank you, Laura.
Spiritual will continued. Here we go. Spiritual will can be strengthened when a person meditates upon the cosmic activity which is partly conveyed through creation myths and may be grasped metaphysically in terms of the abstract becoming more and more, yet only incompletely concrete. There must be a firm recognition of the necessary gap, inherently unbridgeable, between the unconditioned and the conditioned, between the noumenal light and its phenomenal reflections. For those who begin to sense this in the ever-changing world, it can help to initiate a revolution in their everyday relationships. The true occultist starts at the simple level of constant thoughtfulness and moves to a mode of awareness whereby he can effortlessly put himself into the position of another human being. It is the hallmark of spiritual maturity that one has no sense of psychological distance from another, that one can not only salute but also share the unspoken subjectivity of another person, human being. When a thoughtful person begins to look at others in this way, the need for involuntary karma and mere extensions to superficial human contact will be replaced by the inward capacity through every opportunity that comes naturally to discover the universal meaning of human evolution, the potential richness and actual limitations of human nature, and the shared pathos of the spiritual pilgrimage of humanity.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. Mr. Kalmbach writes, I like this about his garden here. I think it's a cool analogy. He writes, you want a lovely garden, you till the soil, removing the rocks and sticks. If needed, you may need advice on this, perhaps add fertilizer. You must then decide what you would like to plant. The seed you plant will determine what emerges from the soil. The soil must be watered, neither too much nor too little. You cannot control the weather. Impatience in waiting to see a sprout or two can be overcome. Do something else for a while. When a sprout or two finally appears, avoid becoming so excited that you pull it up to see how its roots are doing. Let it grow. You did not create it. You did help it grow, doing your part. Its beauty is not of your doing. It is not really your garden. Share its beauty, its bounty with all. Why not pass it on to others? Give it away. Continue giving it away until you have nothing left to give. Enjoy the silence and warmth of the fertile earth, the peacefulness of the gentle breezes. The land is not your land. It belongs to no one single person. It belongs to all. The sprout needs breadth and depth and points to draw it towards the diamond soul. The sprout desires to reach the sun. The will to get there leads it to the light. And with that, this giving it all away, it just reminded me of our teachers. All right. Well, I think, oh, anyone would like to read? I believe this is the last slide. And this is an author and a book, apart from a book, that was turned on to me by Jonathan. Maybe Jonathan can read it. Putting you on the spot.
Okay, so this is by Hugh Janssen Fossé, I guess.
I guess it might be French. Passé. Yeah.
Turns out he's an
It's actually in English.
yeah.
English.
So he talks about the knower. As the knower, Krishna is the unchanging consciousness that watches the creative drama within the field of his being. And he declares that the power to discriminate between the field and its knower is the essential condition of wisdom. But the underlying substance of the field is as eternal in its own mode as its indwelling consciousness. This formless substance in which the knower reflects and contemplates his image with such inexhaustible diversity, this womb of darkness in which the creative light quickens innumerable seeds of life, Vedanta names Mula Prakriti. This is the dark ocean, which is also a mirror of the sky, in and through which the infinite nature of the One is mediated to our human senses. In the Supreme Brahman, eternal mind and eternal substance brood in sublime communion. Infinite thought is at one with infinite potentiality. Within this self-existent harmony, the mystery of creative love is enacted in the marriage of the light and the darkness consummated, of which a universe of life is unceasingly born. Manifested existence is inconceivable without non-being. Were it not latent in being itself, such being would be incapable of self-expression. For creative expression consists in a perpetual transmutation of non-being into being. In this transforming act, non-being is not denied or repudiated. It is embraced and loved, and so gathered into the heart of being where it belongs.
Beautiful. All righty. Well, I think that does it for this present. Oh, okay. We don't need to read that. Let me go back. Let me just unshare. And let me get my audience view up, gallery.
Thank you, Desiree. That was so much to contemplate. My goodness. It's hard to know where to begin in trying to assimilate all those words and make them a part of who we are, which is the great task of every student. And one of the things that was very intriguing that this one sentence you said is looking behind the will. What's going on behind that will? That moment just before we send our energy into action. You know, that one single moment is always quite marvelous to consider what that is, you know, in the core of our being and in the core of the universe.
What is that?
Yes, we can't see it.
Because it's, constant motion. I always try to look at it kind of like a, you have a Jack in a Box, those little toys,
Mm-hmm.
and you wind it up. And as it's winding up, that spring is becoming more and more taut. And at some point, that energy has to release.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of a mechanical way of looking at it. But in some ways, physics follow metaphysics. And I'm thinking, is this what's going on? And is it kind of like an alarm clock that just goes off? Okay, it's ready to wake up. When there's somewhere where it says that there's an impulse that occurs where it just flashes into the germ and then it retreats back.
Yeah.
Into the unknown.
That's right. Into the unknown.
And that's when I thought, when I read about the heart initiating its own impulse, and it's doing that, of course, every second, but it just initiates it. Where does it go until the next initiation?
Yeah.
It seems like to me when I read that, isn't that It's like I know I read that somewhere before, but having to do with this the metaphysics of life, and yeah, and I had to wonder, well, is it just copying its parent? Anyway.
Yes, well, they do say in the Upanishads that all beings are the same in kind and differ only in degree. And when you consider that, you can see that, yes, we are part of that parent source.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kirk?
Hi, Kirk.
Hello, Desiree. Thank you, Laura. Desiree, that was, I think, the best explanation of this theme that I've ever heard.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Thank you.
just so you know that, that's a keeper. I hope that was recorded because that's a keeper. And
Well, thank you.
so many beautiful passages and poetry and mixed with metaphysics. And yeah, it was really, I thought, just wonderful. And these kind of core quotations from HPB, where she talks about cosmic will, which are so explanatory and clarifying.
Mhm.
So really, it's just the way you put it all together. That was, yeah.
Oh,
really
thank you so
fine.
much, Kurt. I really do appreciate that.
But I would just a couple of thoughts. One is Crosby's statement about the spiritual will. He says it acts like lightning. It's instantaneous, and traveling, as HPB says, too fast for the human eye to witness, but that we're always making use of it. We're just not unaware of it. And the other thing that came to mind, which turns into a question, is this idea that, again, quoting HPB, I think it was one of your quotes, where she says, we think that we're using the will to accomplish our personal aims, but in fact, we're just using animalistic desire most of the time. When it becomes personalized, separative, based on an illusory sense of being a separate being, then we're using desire rather than will. We've converted the spiritual will to animalistic desire.
Right.
So,
And
yeah,
that's a mind thing. And that's why I just always want to go back and ask myself, what is nature doing? And not what I'm doing. What is
mm,
nature doing? What is the dharma of these forces? Because it's the mind and our own selfish tendencies that create the chaos, that go outside of home plate, let's say. And it's fine because that's how we learn. We learn through. I always say, no, we learn truth through untruth, because that's how we can compare them. But she also states that on the higher plane, will and mind, you can't tell them apart. I mean, will
right,
and desire, you can't tell them apart.
yeah. Well,
Say, sorry, Kirk, go ahead.
well, I hadn't actually got to my question. That was
Oh,
a
I'm
good
sorry.
comment, but no, that's all right. Uh, the the question that comes down to something very practical and I think usable for people is how does one convert the personal will into the spiritual will? Is there a conversion process, and what's involved in that process? And one of the things that Judge states in the Ocean, in his chapter on desire, he's talking about the principle of karma, goes into the metaphysical and personal, etc. And then he starts talking about vows that
Mhm.
that even a Buddha or Jesus had in some life to take a vow to serve humanity and to keep it alive over a series of lives. That seems to be when it's a bodhisattvic vow, when it has that altruistic impulse at its essence and its nature, even though we're full of defects, and impurities, that we can resonate, whatever level we can resonate to that pure altruism, that becomes like the seed by which the personal will eventually is overcome by the spiritual. So that's kind of my question: is the bodhisattvic vow the key to transforming personal will into spiritual will?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not, dogmatic. I mean, I think that, and I say that because the vow is really to that higher self. It's really to the self that we make that vow. Um, I was reading somewhere where it stated Raghavan Iyer was actually giving one recommendation, and he was talking about how every day, if we concentrate on every action as a bead on a string, and in concentrating on that bead, it's almost like you put it in your mind before a thought comes out or a feeling. It helps to strengthen a line of thought because so much of our thoughts every day are constantly being interrupted. So while we take vows internally, I also think it's important to remind ourselves of our own actions, as we go through our daily activities, almost to envision these actions in front of us so that they don't just become these wisps. They need to be, they need to materialize in front of us so that we can really um, work with them and realize they're real things. They're not just, it's not just vapor. They're real things, all of our thoughts. And to be able to keep a consistency going, I think this visualization that I remember reading about really hit me because it's something that I actually do unconsciously now. Well, consciously, but it's like almost an effortless thing.
That's a
Before
great
we go
comment.
to Maluka,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
yeah, before we go to Maluka, Kirk, did you have anything else to add?
No, just thank Desiree. That's a brilliant comment.
Yeah,
Thank you.
brilliant comment. And before we get to that, to finish this, um, this idea of moving from personal will to spiritual will, does it have anything to do with the slaying of the lunar form? And also later on, there was another quote that said, the knower and the field. And it seems that maybe this is one of the first steps of moving from personal will to spiritual will.
Mhm.
So what is our understanding of the lunar form and what does it mean to slay it in relationship to will? What do we think?
Well, the lunar form, I'm going to say they're impressions, they're tendencies. So human beings, they say, bad thing about human beings is they have bad habits, but the good thing about human beings is they have good habits. And so we have this tamasic force of inertia within us that impresses things. So if we're constantly um, drilling ruts into our brain and doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not helping us, not helping humanity, but those habits form because there's such a thing as Thomas. But Thomas, in and of itself, is just doing its job by nature. That's its dharma. It's doing its job. And inertia is one of the most important um, laws there is, especially for occultists, because it helps them stay stable in these exalted states. So you see, it's all really about mind. It's what we choose to put our attention on. Thomas is
you.
a completely, operating dharmically under law,
Yes.
you know. So always put it back on our mind. It's where we choose. That's what free will is. What we choose to put our mind and attention on is what grows.
Thank you.
Poor
Maluka.
Maluka's been sitting there waiting. Is your hand tired?
Maluka?
Good
There we are.
evening and happy Women's Day to everybody.
Yay.
I always love your talks because you go profound and very they heartfelt. That's how I felt it. So it moved me.
Thank you, Maluka.
Thank you for that. And I just want to make a little comment. I have to comment, but one of them is that I read recently that the Luna, the moon, is dual, is female and male.
Mm.
Yeah, like the daytime is female and nighttime is male. And I say, oh, maybe that's why we have the dark side of the moon, of the moon, and there the other that is always facing the sun. That's the reflection. And truly, none of the planets shine by itself. They're all borrowing the light is the reflection from the sun.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking we have a sun within, right? Because we
Absolutely.
are just like the cosmos.
Let go apart. Mhm.
So we have to learn how to connect to that shine within and borrow maybe the light from the sun too. When I was thinking, and I read recently a nun, they were saying, we have to stop thinking. We're too intellectual. We think
We are
too
too
much.
emotional, yeah.
We should just feel. Feel.
Mhm.
And that's how the compassion is born.
Mhm.
When you go into, let's say to an open space or to the forest or a park, just feel it.
Mhm.
Let
How does
the
your
wind-
heart feel? Can I ask you, Maluka,
Uh-huh.
what is your, just paying attention to what's going on inside? When you look to nature, when you are in a forest or looking out on a vista of what would otherwise be a painting of nature's creation, what goes on in your chest?
Yeah, you start feeling the beat. And I was reading recently that we're saying that when an artist, and you mentioned art, and I know you're an artist too, when an artist paints, there is a bunch of trees, but the artist only choose a few trees. And by doing that, he perfected nature by itself. So we have that ability within us, and everything we see, we can make it more perfect by having that gift. And I just want to mention quickly
Mhm.
that there was an astronaut in space for 178 days that recently just came. And he said, there is a big lie. All my life, I thought that the earth was different. He said he had an epiphany in slow motion. He said he saw slowly how delicate, what a thin, what do you call it? The thing, what this protecting of the way the what surrounded the earth. He said it was like a very thin layer, and how delicate and how he said he started feeling so much compassion, and he came back transformed like a different human being, and he's going to go pro nature and enjoying certain organization. He said, what are we doing to our planet? What are
Mhm.
we doing to our planet? It's all came down to dollars and cents, and we are just destroying ourselves and the planet. We are not here for that. And I was very impressed because this person was an theosophist or philosopher, and there he have an epiphany.
He's not the first astronaut to have an epiphany. It's a different, it's like that. experiencing your first aurora or going to the desert. And this is far beyond that, even though, because you can see you can see the whole of humanity in one spot. And that becomes a life vessel itself. And you don't even intellectualize it. It's just something it comes from here. And that is actually Buddhi awakening.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that idea of Buddhi awakening comes through the last two quotes, one from Kulmbach and the other from Fawcett, where you begin to see all life as the knower and the field. You begin to see all beings working within nature, within the sevenfold being, all constantly in a process of adjusting and self-adjusting. Even the planet Earth, in its orbit around the sun, is constantly having to make adjustments. There is
Yeah.
the knower of the earth and the field of the earth, and there's the knower of the plant in the ground and the field of the plant in the ground. And when you start to experience that, when the spiritual will awakens through the recognition of the difficulties that maybe others are having within their field, and you can discern the real self from the difficulties that they're going through. And that awakens the spiritual will from the personal will. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? David Grossman.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that great talk. Yeah, it seems like that any time somehow we drop off that lunar form you were talking about, and pick up the solar, so to speak, another way to put that, anytime that we act for the good of the whole in any situation, it seemed that the spiritual will is automatically ignited.
Mm.
Yeah, but whatever. Which is sort of something like, you can't sort of mathematically make up a formula for it, I guess. Sort of be here now, right? Your whole being to see the need, to fulfill the need without without the lunar getting in the way.
Without fear getting in the way.
Right?
So much of what we experience in life is fear-based. It might
Doubt.
come out as whether it comes out in violence even, a lot of it is fear-based. Agreed. What is that? The fear of not having? Lust, the fear of not being loved? Gluttony, the fear of not being able to feed oneself
Yeah.
or have anything. I mean, it just seems to be we counter that which we fear with an overabundance, whether it be in reality or fantasy, with that which is opposite. And that's
Did you have
why,
anything?
oh, so,
Oh, sorry. I was just going to see if David wanted to add something else.
okay, and then Ken also.
Oh, no, I just had said, that's all I had to say, really. Yeah. But maybe just thinking back to that, we're so often stuck in the lunar. Another name for that's the personality, really. Like the lunar Petrie's built all the forms. Yeah. So, and Cam is connected with the astral body, after death state, and all, like you were talking about a little while ago. So it's we got to hit that note of Kamadeva, the higher one. Yeah.
Is
Thank
sound.
you. Yeah.
Definitely is sound.
You're right.
Would you like to add something or ask a question?
They can.
Yeah, you have to unmute.
Yes, hello there. I'm gonna just come up to the podium here.
Oh, okay. There he is.
That slide
Howdy, yes. My name is Jonathan, however. That slide on the knower in the latter part on the spiritual will, and a few weeks ago we had a great talk about the Kshetra and Kshetrajna. And so I was wondering in that slide, and it said the Vedanta connects it to Mula Prakriti. And so really I'm wondering, how does this field and this knower connect to Mula Prakriti, and Mula Prakriti being pre-cosmic substance on the one hand, but also in the talk you were saying it has to do with motion or activity. So it's maybe a pre-cosmic abstract several things. This knower and field combination, this combo platter of the knower and field. So I was wondering if you could say a little more about that combination.
About the knower in the field?
Yes, knower and field.
It's back to the first part. Remember in the beginning you were talking about the cosmos and the beginning, and you've got the Mula Prakriti there, and then how that then it becomes more into came into the field of anthropogenesis. But so how is the question then, Jonathan, the idea of the connection between that Mula Prakriti within the cosmos and within ourselves?
Yes. That again, I'm trying to understand Mula Prakriti on the one hand, but also how it relates to the knower and the field combination.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Desiree?
And pre-cosmic motion.
Yeah.
And motion?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, of course, this is just me talking here. I think everything goes back to motion. That the actor and the action become one.
Yes, thank you. And I realize that sound is emotion itself. You're saying buddhi is sound. Well, thank you for that.
So you've got your it's like a sentence. You have your object and you have your subject and your object, and in the center you have your verb or verbum, and verbum is the action, and if you get rid of your object, then you have the subject and the verb. If you get rid of your subject, then you only have the action. But when the action is, when the subject is absorbed into the action, it actually becomes the action itself. What that is, I don't know. But I'm sure.
The dancer. The dancer, when asked, why do you dance? And he says, because when I dance, I disappear. Where the subject and the object become one. Mm-hmm. Or Leonard Bernstein said that when I can make the music outside of me sound like the music inside of me, I'm in heaven.
Mm.
So they're in that subjective objective, and behind that stands that spiritual will.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So Judy has her hand up.
Yes.
And then I saw also, just a moment, Judy. I also saw that we had a hand up by Ken, not Ken. Oh, it's gone. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Thank you for a magnificent talk. And as you pointed out, will is both cosmic and personal. On the personal level, I found that when people read the Bhagavad Gita, they do not understand suspend the results of your action, because it seems that we act toward a purpose. But it seems that the critical distinction is, are you acting for your personal self, or are you acting for your higher self, for all of humanity?
I think we lost you. Judy, you're muted.
Am I muted?
Now you're fine. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, as you pointed out, will is both cosmic and personal. On the personal level, the Bhagavad Gita, of course, teaches the suspension of the results of action to do one duty impersonally. But I think people confuse this and think this means that, you can have nothing for yourself. Well, it depends on your view of the self. It seems if a person goes to medical school, they want to become a doctor. Do they want to become a doctor so that they can make a lot of money and be on Carmody Street in London and drive a Rolls Royce? Or do they want to become a doctor to really help people who are in need? And so it seems the suspension of the result of action on the personal level would be to desire nothing for your personal self. And of course, this is difficult to find out what the distinction is, because I've had so many students to tell me, oh, it's just impossible to be unselfish. We're all selfish. That's the way it is. But I think in a certain way, you can still develop yourself and not be selfish. Do you think that is a clear distinction to make? This important topic.
Well, that's why I think that it's so important to understand those laws dharmically, because yes, I mean, we're here to raise matter, and it's important to be able to, as you say, distinguish between the two. But that is being able to discern between right and wrong. There's a little bit of a higher degree of discernment that occurs when the individual has been through a little bit of agitation. And what I mean by agitation is that they're giving attention to those lower tendencies that need to get worked out, and they're doing it consciously. It's not something that is necessarily, an unconscious effort. They're really working on stuff. But we also have to confront this notion of, well, I got to do this because I'll have bad karma otherwise. This is a selfish approach too. You almost have to have no concept of karma in your everyday practice. You almost have to let that just be. Let nature do what nature does, and don't try to interfere with what nature's going to do, and be completely focused on learning, being open to ideas. What did I used to say? Here's a little saying I would remind myself. Be open-minded as a child, equal-minded as a sage, and as steady as a mountain. And those are just kind of words to remind myself when I feel like I'm getting a little too emotional when I don't need to be. But just being observant of oneself, as constant as one can, amongst the minutiae of activities that we have to encounter all the time, is training oneself to use discretion. I mean, it's not supposed to necessarily be a comfortable place, because we're detaching ourselves slowly from those tendencies, and it's very uncomfortable sometimes. That's why in the voice it says you're going to have an agitated body. Be aware of it. You don't have to be stuck in it, but be aware of it, observe it, and let it pass.
Yes, all right. That was a beautiful answer. Yeah, to discern the real from the unreal, as the voice says, is one of the first steps. And that then unreal is that which is constantly changing, as your talk indicated. And it's not that changing body and forms that we occupy is unimportant, but it's that we have to realize that we are not those changing forms, that we're more than that, and so is all life. So David has his hand up, and I think this could be the last question.
Okay. So how do we avoid the desert of apathy?
Oh boy.
Laura, you
Well,
got this.
that's the talk at the end of the month, David. I think it's on vigilance and sloth.
I'll
But
tune in for sure.
yeah, but Desiree did mention something interesting in that regard about inertia and the importance of inertia. You know, so that has something to do with it, that we need these vehicles to hold us down, so to speak, or we'd be flying all over space. So there has to be something of an inertia can be a negative because of sloth and tamas, but it also can be a positive because, as Desiree mentioned, it is a form of stability. So, did you have something to add to that, Desiree?
I'm good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Laura. And
No.
thank you for sharing.
I think we're getting help. There is a moon eclipse March 13 or 14, and they say the lunar eclipses are believed to assist us in getting out of stagnation. So hopefully that's one way of being helped by the stars. And thank you so much, you both. That was a beautiful talk, and I love how you shared too, Laura.
Yes, thanks,
Looking
Laura.
forward to, we're looking forward to the recording because this talk is worthy of a repeat and a listening to again. So thank you, Desiree.
You're all very welcome, and I hope everyone has a marvelous evening. And special thanks also to you, Laura, as well as to Monica